I'm so happy that we have some of the best female filmmakers working in India and Australian director Mirrah Foulkes with us today. Welcome, ladies. I would like to begin by raising a toast to you and everything that you do.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
I think this is the first time I've ever been on a panel that's just women. I mean, it's amazing to be connecting with colleagues across the globe at such a weird and uncertain time in the world. But it's also amazing to be on this panel full of wonderful emerging female filmmakers.
Lovely to meet you. We just saw your film last night. It was fantastic.
Thank you. I'm glad you got a chance to see it.
I am so glad that I watched Judy and Punch at the festival, Mami, when it was played. And I'm so glad I watched the film.
Oh, you got to see them at the festival. That's great. That's great.
You've all gotten to make your first feature. Of course, Sheetal's made her first short film, which was very celebrated. I just wanted to get all of you together because it's really, really important to kind of, I feel, galvanize filmmakers and female filmmakers. I know we want to get to a point where, the female part of it is not prefixed all the time to all the roles that we take on, but we also know that the numbers are dismal. There is now conversation at fever pitch about inclusion, about representation. And therefore, it becomes very important to kind of just have conversations about what the piece is looking like, what the challenges are, and what can we do in an ambit of limited influence to just keep on pulling people in. So in your journey to get to your first feature or first shot, do you feel that your experience was any different than the experience that your male counterparts might have had?
I feel it's not so easy for either gender. It was more of a struggle I had within. I was so consumed with this whole belief that, can I really do this? It was such a huge struggle for me right there. 4 days before my shoot, I almost gave up. And I was looking for a co-director. If I can't do this, I need to look for someone who can really help me shoot this whole thing. So when we talk about the struggle part of it, I really think that this was all there where I was struggling with whether I can really do this or not.
For me, I felt that I could have made my debut maybe 3-4 years earlier than I made. But there were a lot of questions on my capability because there was a female director who wants to make a science fiction. And there was a lot of love and sympathy I could feel in the room. But that was not what I wanted. I wanted a lot of confidence for me. And that took some time.
I had a lot of privilege coming in because I was already an actor. That was very advantageous for me because I think I got a lot of meetings, at least first-time meetings, even though a lot of them refused to finance the film. But I got a lot of meetings. It was easy for me to do that, which it may not have been otherwise.
What I love about what Konkona says, and probably no male director will ever say that I was very privileged. For her to say that and to accept that, and that itself, I feel, is the way women deal with our problems. The first thing you do is you overcome them, and then you say, no, it's been easy for me, as opposed to men. So I think that is the root reason why we are all here and doing whatever we are doing.
I think that there were different struggles that I faced coming into my journey. But having said that, I was also supported hugely by a team of men that were my friends and peers that were filmmakers, and they were really the reason that I started making films. I started directing. I recognized that there were certain struggles I was facing that they weren't necessarily facing. They were actually my biggest champions. I'm a part of a filmmaker collective called Blue Tongue, and I'm the only woman in that collective. And the guys are all a bit older than me, about sort of 10 years older than me, and were more established in their careers when I met them and started working with them. But they all championed me like nobody else, and they still do. So, while there were certain obstacles, I felt very held and supported by the good men in my life.
For me, again, it is a strange situation that animation in India, even if there was a man in my place wanting to make the films, would have found it as difficult because of the subject, because of the fact that it's not for children, because it didn't have stars. So I was making it difficult for myself, whether I was a man or a woman. And the other thing is I worked independently. So I got into the mainstream live action struggle to make a film. not the animation industry. If I was to be part of the animation industry, I don't think I would have been able to make a film because it is seriously dominated by men. We all love Studio Ghibli films. We think the characters are so beautiful and they're so feminist, but there's not been a single woman director from Studio Ghibli. And that is strange because when it comes to animation, big studios, Disney is less than 1% women. This year, as you said, they have just come up with a decision of 40% directors will be women. So now it's a jump from 1 to 40. Whatever has caused that, whatever they might be able to do, it's phenomenal. So I feel, in a sense, we all find it times very exciting because whatever little we have been doing, which was frustrating till a few years back, now, especially after the Me Too movement and things, it has started becoming fruitful for us. So the struggle just becomes easier. It just becomes more rewarding.
Just this 3-4 days ago, I put up a post on Instagram. I took it from somewhere. I didn't write this myself. And I think it's got more views and likes than even the chats that I do. And this is not a man-hating post. I think a crisis of confidence that also comes from not having enough opportunity. And when you get that opportunity, I think that opportunity sometimes doesn't sit lightly because it's not the norm. And the struggle to actually get finance and to get greenlit, to actually find your way in that web, which is dominated by men, it's not normal that you have so many female directors. I want to know from all of you, if there is a crisis of confidence, are we thinking too much?
I'm still very new into this. Just one short film also for me. It's just that so much I'm getting to.
An amazing short film.
The thing is a whole thing of communication and how, like being on set, there was this whole fear of even going there and calling the shot, saying action. I was like, how do you do this? I practice at home. You have to be loud. Sheetal, people have to hear you.
Sheetal, I would pay to see you rehearse action.
First day was so much of things that was happening, and also because I was acting in my story. So when I decided, I think everybody was like, you can't do this. You're making your first film and you're trying to act in that story, so it's going to be a mess. By the end of it, I was like, I want to make the story. It's okay if I don't act in the story. And that's how it switched, because it all started with, I'm going to act in the story. But the whole thing just shifted, and I was like, I'm going to look for an actor because it's just too much for me to kind of. That was my experience. But I think it's just like a constant struggle. But at the same time, to have that clarity in your mind that you need to be very sure of how you see it.
I had that same imposter syndrome, like, will I be able to do this? Will I be able to do it right? And I think at some point I've sort of dropped it and I've just embraced my authenticity, like in some way, like, over the course of last few years, I am not no more scared to say, hey, how will we do this? First of all, I know that I prep like super hard. That I think that will never change because I guess, that part of imposter syndrome will still, and it's pushing me in a good way because I'm prepping hard. So I know I've done my homework, I've done my research, and still if we are trying to do something new, if we are not asking those questions, how we'll do this, how will we discover new things, how will we push boundaries of cinema in general?
Konkona?
I wanted to say one thing from earlier, which is that when I was going to make my feature and the protagonist is a young man, I remember a few people asking me, you're a female filmmaker, why isn't your protagonist a woman? And that's so much part of the problem, because why are we constantly telling women what to do? Let women do what they want to do. And the thing is, my film was about toxic masculinity. And I feel like even when you're dealing with feminism, a lot of it, the focus has to be on men because a lot of the problems are coming from there.
One funny thing which happened to me when I was directing my film was, one of the things, everybody who was interviewed in my crew, all the animation producers, one thing they said was, she knows exactly what she wants and she knows how to get it. Now, I don't know whether that's a compliment or basically them telling me very sweetly, you're a control freak. So this is where I had to get to that stage where I can do everything if another person can't do it, which I did with my shots, and reach that level of making a feature. to not take shit from anybody saying this is not possible in animation, this is very difficult, this is going to take this much money, this is going to take that much. It didn't. And that's why I could make it in a very, very small budget. And of course, my men producers who were great friends and all that, at one point, we almost I was walking out of that studio, and my producer, Deborah Sati, was also a woman, and she's wonderful. She came down from London. And she said, let me sort this out. And then she did. She spoke to them and she came back and she told me, you know what, you're not being very kind to them. So I said, what do you mean? You're not complimenting them. They're doing so much. I said, they're not doing enough. That's why I'm fighting with them all the time, because I want them to do this. I'm aggressive. She said, no. You're a woman. They love to hear good things from a woman. And that is how it is going to work. I said, this is all shit and things like that. But eventually, I had to play that role of a woman who nurtures men who are not doing what you're doing.
The mother.
Just going back to that idea of being of sort of imposter syndrome, I think sometimes that can be flipped a little bit and it can be projected onto you sometimes. So I've had moments of walking onto a set and had lovely male crew members who are genuinely supportive and wanting me to feel comfortable come up and go, don't worry, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about this. And I'm like, of course I'm going to be fine. I don't need you to tell me I'm going to be fine. But that the expectation is that you're going to carry this kind of an anxiety into it. And you get to a certain point in your career where you don't. You know how to articulate what it is you need. And that can sometimes be a bit off-putting, I think, for people.
We refuse to be like men and aggressive and cruel and things like that. And we refuse to be like what they expect us to be as women, which is motherly and nurturing. And somewhere in between, where you know what you want, where you can get it, you're authoritative, and yet you're not, you have your faults, you're not perfect.
Yeah.
And that, I feel, if you get accepted as, then you stop calling yourself a female director or a woman director, because then you have encompassed it all. You're not expected to be anything. You are a new person, regardless of your gender, doing this thing. You know your job and your crew will work with you. That would be a utopia.
Yeah, exactly.
I love this conversation because the thing is, there is so much conversation about how we need to be on set. And the thing is, this conversation will never happen on a manual. There is an expectation from women to be nurturing and polite. Whereas a male director, when he walks onto set, whether he's directing for the first time or has been directing for the past 20 years, everybody falls in line. There's a natural authority that he comes with. Is this something that you think about when you're putting the crew for your projects together?
This short pilot episode that we shot, I had a lovely executive producer with me, and he's young and he's very good at his job, and I've worked with him in different projects where I was an actor. So I was also kind of learning the ropes from him too. In Hindi we use this word jugaad mein, like if things don't go as per rule, you can just kind of manage somehow, or maybe get somebody to do something maybe for a little less or a little more. And so he kept telling me, okay, maybe I can speak to him like this and you go in and speak to him like that. And so there was this good cop, bad cop thing going on. And pretty soon I realized I was always the bad cop, because no matter, it wasn't that I was the nurturing mother there. If people don't come on time in the production group, and if the call sheet's gone out and I've said 10 o'clock assemble time and people don't come in, I am pissed. And this is just how I am, because I'm a stickler for time. And the more I got pissed, he kept coming and saying, maybe you ought to be a little nicer to them. And then I had to reflect on that. I was like, do I have to reflect on it as a personality trait, or do I have to reflect on it because I'm a woman? So I had to actually ask him that. Do you mean that Parvathy, the actor, they all know, who should be wanting to be liked? Because I don't care to be liked. It's okay that they hate me. They just need to come on time so that our production costs stay, within budget.
One interesting thing I noticed is how we react to authority. I don't necessarily think that the director needs to be somebody who is authoritative in that sense, but I think there is some kind of an expectation in the crew for the director to be that kind of a person. And it is very normalized for directors, often male directors, because most directors seem to be male, not all, for them to be a certain kind of director, have a certain authority where they are screaming or shouting. And I just didn't want that kind of a atmosphere on my set. Of course, I had a kick-ass first AD who was a female first AD. And it is interesting to note that many times I've seen that female firsts have incorporated the kind of authoritative behavior that is acceptable in men. So she is doing a lot of that for me, which, I mean, is just an observation as to how we react to that. So, I mean, I wasn't that kind of a person. I managed fine because I had my first, but I think that is a bit of a problem, how people react to you, especially maybe if you're a first-time filmmaker.
And also this notion of how you're expected to be on set, how a leader is expected to behave. And I just think it's particularly interesting that there's so many actors on the panel, actors come directors or the other way around, because I think my experience was that I thought a lot about that when I was shooting my film, and then subsequently I always think a lot about it. What is expected of me on set in terms of how I should be, how I should manage because you're being a leader in that moment, you're being the captain of a ship, and I can choose to be this captain, which is very familiar, which people have an understanding of, or I can choose to be a captain that feels a little bit more of me. And I think the tendency for a lot of the women I know is that tends to be a gentler, maybe less confrontational place. But it's tricky because you're also wanting all of those people that you're steering to have faith in you. So there's this balance between wanting to have a strength and wanting to have a vulnerability that will bring out the most in people's work.
For me, the biggest part when I grew up is, I think the one advantage I had was I'd made around 5 short films before I jumped into my features. So I already had long-term collaborators with whom I had very strong one-on-one relationships. So my set was, in general, a very comfortable space. And these people knew my strengths as well as weaknesses. But at the same time, of course, keep your eye open and collaborating with newer people. Like just off late, I'm doing something and I was collaborating with a production designer. She was this very young girl, like, 20 years of us. I was like, you're so young. What are you doing? Like, already working at this age. But then she was so good and with fresh ideas, and she had studied production design, and she was talking to me about materials in a way that nobody had spoken about. So I also liked, Cargo, for example, had 6 to 7 debuts. So there are a lot of first-time technicians, making their debut. So that relationship is also stronger when you're with people the early stages of their career. So I think overall, that's how you build an environment where you can be yourself. I think that is the most important thing when you're doing anything, either an actor or as a director or any technician. If you can be yourself happily in that set, at least that is the safest space that you have created for yourself outside whatever the world is. So I just try to do that, try to create a good space for myself. So it takes time to prove, but it's worth it. The time is worth it.
I have to connect with people differently. So my sound designer needs a certain thing from me. My AD needs a different thing from me. This actor needs a different thing from me. And I think I'm able to, or at least I try to, or sometimes maybe I'm able to do that. But it is exhausting. And I'm a mom in real life, so I totally relate to what you guys are saying about the mother, women being having to be nourishing, etc. And, I can be, if that's what's needed to get things done, I can be that. If something else is needed, I can be that. I don't particularly identify with any of those things. But to have to, do those shifts, I find that sometimes very exhausting.
Mm.
I know what
it's so interesting you talk about that laser focus, that you were, your best self in that moment. Because I often, I reflect a lot on the things I would have done differently in my film, and there are so many things. But sometimes I remember that I'm really proud of the director that emerged, that I didn't even know was there, and the leader that emerged that I'd only ever kind of imagined might be there. And it's really important to do that because, I think we have a capacity that is so much bigger sometimes than what we can imagine. And I don't know about you guys, but my tendency sometimes is to focus on all the things that I did wrong. Oh, and I remember that day where I gave that bad note to an actor or this or that. But I have to constantly remind myself that there were periods in there where I just felt like I was on fire because your material more intimately than anybody else. And
So important to self-reflect as well, because I mean, just because I've done this and whatever it's done doesn't mean yes, I've done it and it's fine. I found it because I think in retrospect that I was not as nurturing to my actors as I could have been. And that is something I realized only later. And it is really sad because I'm an actor. Primarily an actor. I've acted for like more than 20 years. So I'm primarily an actor. And I wish that I had been able to give them that space. So that's a note to myself, really, for maybe next time. But I think it's such an important quality, and it doesn't take away from your strength to be able to look back and self-reflect and introspect.
It's so important. That's really interesting, though. I'd just love to hear everyone else's thoughts on that, because one of the things that really struck me that I was not expecting at all, because everyone says to you when you're an actor turned director, oh, you must be really good with actors. It must be so easy. You must be great with actors. And I mean, it's easy in that it's demystified. I'm not afraid of actors because I understand the process. But I was really surprised at still how hard it was directing my actors. I thought it would just be, that would be the breeziest thing, and all the technical stuff, the lenses and everything would be really complex. But I still found it really confronting directing actors. I don't know if any of the other actors had that experience directing.
I was actually going to wait for all your experiences before I get started. I was like, did you find it easy as an actor to connect with other actors?
I think as an actor also, you have to be quite malleable because you've worked with so many different directors, and that equation is so primal for an actor. That's so primary and important. And different directors have different approaches. And so, I find myself adjusting to different directors in different ways. And it helped me as an actor because, as an actor, firstly, even in the writing, it helped me because I would play out everything that I wrote. I would imagine it and act it out and play out everything that I wrote. And even on set, it was very convenient because I would know I'm not going to be able to get up and turn from here because I have to, it's not coming easy. So a lot of that part of it was easy, but I think I wasn't maybe as nurturing, and I had a certain vision exactly of what I wanted. So I would keep pushing for that.
I have a confession to make. After directing Cargo, I did Atul Mongia's acting class for a week just so that I'll be able to, direct actors better. Because for me, if the actors are sort of method actors, like for example, Konkona, Vikrant, they are like very studied actors. I could really connect, and I felt that I was very satisfied and we were operating in the same plane. But if there are some actors who come and they say they're instinctive actors, as a director, I was just not finding, right place to plug in what exact instructions to give. So I was just trying to, for me, they became sort of a black box. And how should I unravel that? So for that, I thought maybe I should just learn more about the craft, how to approach it, how to approach the subtext. Like Mirrah, I have to say, like Judy and Punch, every actor is so good. Like in every note is so perfect. I have to say, I really was admiring that. So yeah, so I'm always envious of directors who are great actors, and this is a panel filled with great actor directors. So yeah.
Why so many short films? I'm grateful for them. I love those short films. I've seen each one of them. But do you guys feel that as female artists, it's incumbent upon you to start making your own material because there is a dearth of good material out there for you to sink your teeth into?
That's exactly why I started writing and making short films. I mean, I wasn't even sure I wanted to direct. I didn't have as much work as I wanted as an actor, and I knew I wanted longevity in filmmaking in this industry, but I never went to film school. And I think part of that inherent imposter syndrome will always be with me because I never went to film school. And, my film school was working on sets as an actor and starting to kind of absorb what I could. But the thing I love about short filmmaking is that's where you can take risks, and that's where you can kind of gather, other young emerging people around you and just try stuff, and you build your tribe. You, as Arati was saying, you start to build your comrades around you who you're going to go on to work with in the future. And that was a really important kind of part of transitioning into features for me. So yeah, I just treated those shorts as like my own version of film school, and I felt like the the bolder they were, the more I was experimenting with my own authentic voice, the more I was happily prepared to fail in them. Because, you know, we work in a medium that costs a lot of money. So when you're self-funding a short film, it's a lot easier to go, this might not work, but who cares, than when you're making a feature. So there's a freedom in that. And there's an amazing freedom. And there's a freedom that I hope to try and carry through into my feature work, because sometimes you start to become safer and safer as the burden of the responsibility gets bigger. So, you know, I think it's important to try and continue to tap into whatever it was that you sparked your imagination when you were beginning. But and that was my experience with the shorts.
Well, in animation, I think every short should be considered a feature because it takes about 3 to 4 years to make each of them. I am still a very shorts-oriented person because one knows the labor of animation. So my ideas are small enough to be told in the kind of animation that I can do and that I can finish off. And of course, I didn't have the privilege of having the choice of saying I have more freedom in shorts. But I realized as I kept doing them one after another, I was depleting my resources. I would need a lot of time put into the shorts. I would earn nothing. I would lose money, and they would go to 100, 150 festivals, which is also an expense eventually because shorts are not even granted channel and things like that. So it was a lot to do with the practical fact, and then just that everybody thought I should be making a feature. But then I took my time. I had a story. I felt something was brewing in me, and I had a producer who got interested in my work and kind of encouraged me. But it took about 7 years to finally finance the film and make it and finish it, which to me was, and while I was doing that, I still made a short, because inside of that entire process of raising finance, I realized if I take one of the stories of my feature film and make a short film, it will become easier for me to find finance. And this is where the confidence in a woman short film animation maker wanting to make a feature film has to be cultivated. So I made a short film out of one of the stories of Bombay Rose, which took 2 years to make, and then managed through that to build the confidence and find the finance for Bombay Rose. So a lot of times it was a way to make the feature, but at another level, it was also far more pleasurable to make the short film than the feature. Even now, after Bombay Rose, I've just finished a short film because that's something.
Congratulations, which is going to Locarno.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. But it's something I could make so easily in during the pandemic.
You know, the one thing that I wanted to also ask you, Mirrah, is that there are these wonderful female directors in Australia, Jennifer Kent, you work with Jane Campion and Kitty Green. Is there a sort of a tribe, a kind of a collective that exists? Do you guys get together? Is there some sort of synergy that is there? Is the industry galvanized in a way that you support each other and kind of work towards, pulling more people in and, collecting data and kind of figuring out how you can expand the piece in terms of representation, in terms of getting equality on the set and in front of the screen?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, we're lucky because the funding bodies in Australia are making huge pushes forward towards gender parity. So that's happening. But I would say that my experience of being a director in Australia, and particularly in relation to my female peers, is it has been quite lonely for me.
When the Women's Collective happened, I felt so bad because we are not in Kerala and not South Indian, we're not cinematographers and all those things. And one felt, as Mirrah says it now, I didn't realize that it's better for actors. But I felt extremely alone. And of course, it's animation, so you don't really belong in animation. You don't really belong in live action. You don't belong here, there. And then you create this amongst yourselves, which if there was a man in my place would put his foot in all of them and emerge as somebody who is regarded as a successful or whatever director in all of them.
We don't have anything like that here, but actually in Kerala, and Parvathy is one of the founding members of that, they started a collective, Women in Film Collective, which is now 4 years old. Yeah. And they're all dedicated working film professionals who actually do so much of the heavy lifting in, putting processes in place, galvanizing the industry, getting people together, fighting for redressal of things which are not okay, from sexual harassment to, just setting the record straight in terms of things that happen, to gaslight artists or not, be inclusive, an inclusive space. And it's the only kind that exists in India. And we are a country that has over 22 official languages and probably those many film cultures. Does anybody feel the need for a global tribe?
Yes.
to get on maybe even a WhatsApp group and say, hey, what's happening with you?
2017, Women in Cinema Collective was formed, although because of a terrible, terrible incident that happened in Kerala. But we did come together and we realized it was not just that was like, because until then, as I put it, usually we were all just this individual floating islands and we were made to believe that was our destiny. That's just how we were supposed to be. And it's very smooth and sort of like Slytherin house, like how they play the games in pitting us against each other, like not on screen, but off screen, to not let us have a space to bond and talk and discuss. But once the collective was formed, we all started talking, and like Smriti said, and thanks Smriti for giving such a wonderful introduction to the collective, we all started, despite the topic, like the topic would be about, we need to meet the chief minister, or we need to meet the cultural minister, and we need to again push the associations for compliance, for posh compliance, or this thing or the other. And it's frustrating, but whenever we do come together, we start sharing stories and we realize it's happened to all of us and we don't feel alone any longer. I don't remember what it was like 4 years ago to be a working professional in this industry as a woman. I just feel more of an individual. Like I feel like as much as I'm empowered as a woman, the more I'm becoming an individual, because it's suddenly that line is getting blurred because of the presence of all these wonderful women who are directors, writers, editors, artists, cinematographers, all of us together. But then again, 2018, Mami happens to me and I meet Smriti Kiran, who is the championist of champion. I've never seen anyone who is so dedicated to championing women especially, but anybody for that matter. So I think there is a massive rewiring and restructuring that has happened in my head too.
It's so important for actors to have a collective, and I think that's a really important thing for this and other issues to address, to have some kind of a fallback option that you can ask a community if you need to.
Smriti still tells me, why don't you call up someone you really admire and chat with them, have a discussion. And I'm like, is that not going to be frowned upon? Will they think there's an ulterior motive? Because that's what I'm told as a woman. If I call a male director, that's pushy. You're not supposed to do that. There is a code of conduct. So I remember the only time I did actually make that push was to actually find a mentor, to find somebody that I can look up to as an actor, especially in the industry. There was very little interview, actually not a lot of interviews with actors. With stars, yes, but with actors to actually discuss the craft, there was no space. And so I was like a scavenger on the internet, finding everyone from inside the actor's studio to other really far off websites to find interviews. I found my mentor, she doesn't know it. I think she does, but she must have forgotten. It's Cate Blanchett. I stalked Cate Blanchett until she actually came to India, went up, snuck up behind her with a glass of wine and said, "Can I speak to you? You're like my teacher. You don't know that." And then after that, I broke the ice there. I started going up to different women in the industry saying, what was it like for you? You're like, let's grab a cup of coffee. Not as often as I should. The idea that we shouldn't form an alliance of some sort, that is a massive perception here. So I want to actually break it, and be it global, be it Indian, pan-national, I don't care. But I'm here, I'm present, use me. Pick my brain, use me. We're all just gonna grow interlocked. It's gonna be beautiful.
You've made your first films. What has changed after making it? Does it become easier? Do you know how to do this better, not only in terms of the craft, but the hustle of it?
hustle doesn't get any easier. The financing doesn't seem to get any easier. In fact, it feels harder than it's ever been before. But just this innate little kind of seed in me that knows that I'm capable of doing it. That doesn't get taken away by anyone saying no, or any bad meeting, or any actor passing. That can't kind of be taken away. So I feel really excited about experiencing what it's like to make my second film without carrying the whole weight of that. I was never supposed to be here. I'm nothing. I'm worthless. This is a mistake. I'm really looking forward to throwing that baggage off and knowing that that I can do it. I've just got to get someone to finance it. I'll let you know how it goes.
Somewhere we feel after you made your first film, you won't be a struggling filmmaker anymore, but it never changes. You struggle much more.
Good to know.
Parvathy is going to start her journey as a filmmaker this year.
Hey.
If you can give her one piece of advice, it would be great.
I'm ready.
What advice you want from me, Parvathy?
In your next film.
Don't be scared to push if you haven't got it. Keep pushing.
Ultimately, it's going to be what comes on screen. So no one's going to know whether you slept enough or that guy didn't turn up or it's something there. So there's no excuses. One has to be able to also have a plan, but then improvise.
Parvathy doesn't need any advice from any of us. So good. She's so smart. She's so capable.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for sharing. I admire each one of you so much. And I'm so grateful for what you do. Keep pulling in people, keep creating space on that table that you have going for yourself. I also want to thank the Australian Consulate General in Mumbai and John Edmund, the festival director of the Queensland Film Festival, that helped us get Australian talent, which is Mirrah is right here. And then Shannon couldn't join us, but Shannon will come in for future roundtables that we do.
And
but
please do convey our love for baby teeth to Shannon.
Yes, absolutely.
I will absolutely tell her that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for making it. Thank you, guys. To watch all the Jio MAMI Industry Programme conversations, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jio MAMI Mumbai Film Festival.